also featured in Carbon Pulse. That's cool. Why is it so cool? Well, let's break it down. So for one, I don't know about you, but when especially it comes to Jasmy, if Jasmy is being mentioned word of mouth or by, literally verbatim, featured where they mention actually Jasmy instead of old Max connecting the dots for you, I'm always paying attention to that. You guys are as well. So what is this? Well, let's blow it up a little bit more. So we have this thing here, and I think I actually have this on the other page, so I think it's already blown up. It talks about this whole thing of carbon pulse. It says, eliminate emissions. For instance, supply U.S. carbon offsets, generate returns. How about you? When we talk about the whole thing of utility in motion, that sounds like a lot of utility being in motion, does it not? So for one, you do see this listed over here. And if you want the actual site, I can actually provide you that. Let me just go ahead and drop that in the comments for you. So let's give this a second to load up. Yes, here it is in the comments. I've gone ahead and dropped it down for you guys because you guys like to have a source. I understand how that goes. And, even at the collegiate level, we're supposed to do 2 sources and so on, but there is another source you could pull up if you look more into it. I would encourage that. But while you're looking at that, or while you're just sitting, on your couch like Boomer and Sooner with his dog, you can enjoy what we have in regards to the coverage. So follow along. Let's get into this. And basically, even though the screen is a little smudged because this guy took a, kind of a funky screenshot with this and so on, I want to jump into some of this. So for one, it's going to look a little blurry because I think the guy took it with his cell phone, but you're going to see some key things here. And I wanted to just regionally just take you to that link that you see. But like I had to, jump through a bunch of hoops to become registered. I think I've used this source a few times. So, they only allow like 3 or 4 times to show it. But for you, if this is the first time you ever clicked on that particular source, you should be able to read the whole thing. And if you're not, then just follow on the screen. And yes, it does look a little blurry, but it is from basically yesterday, and it is in regards to November 29th. And what you're going to see here is, like it says, cross-sector alliance that aims to revitalize Japan's carbon credit market is planning to launch a carbon exchange next spring, it announced Wednesday. Now, I want to point this out. We know that Jasmy is moving to a layer 2 blockchain, AI blockchain solution with optimism. We also know that when it comes to the 4th quarter lockup, this is in regards to Japan's 4th quarter, not our 4th quarter, because obviously, as of tomorrow, this is going to be the last month of our 4th quarter. Their 4th quarter extends all the way to March. So to me, from what I gathered, this is an alignment of everything, kind of getting your ducks in a row, So does this basically mention Jasmy? Absolutely, it does mention Jasmy. We're going to get to that here in a second. It goes on to mention in this specific article that I'm bringing to you guys, a cross-sector alliance that aims to revitalize Jasmy's carbon credit market. I should say Japan's carbon credit market is basically planning to launch a carbon credit next spring, and it announced it last Wednesday. All right, so just a few days ago. Tokyo-based tech firm Jasmy, oh my gosh, right? Because you guys don't want just connect all the dots and stuff. You want to start hearing it by name, and I'm telling you flat out, since last week, even though I haven't been with you guys since Saturday, okay, we have pointed out that you're now starting to see more and more different, for instance, tabloids and news publications mention Jasmy by name. That's awesome. We need to start seeing more of that, do we not? Especially when it comes to this whole concept of adoption. Shout out to Icy Amphibian. He's been giving me a lot of information. Shout out to Dip Metaverse. Dip was mentioning, he went over to Japan. He got to meet the one and only Son in person, right? Very cool, right? To be able to see some of our ambassadors, especially if they're from Europe or the United States, meet the head honcho, or I should say head honcho, but, obviously Hara. And one thing he mentioned was, in Japan, it's kind of like a popularity contest. One thing is like, for instance, you have, what's his name? Mr. Watanabe, if I'm not mistaken, if I pronounced that right. Very, very popular figure in Japan when it comes to blockchain in regards to A-Star. And I've stated, you know what, I wouldn't mind owning some A-Star, right? Popular gaming token over there and so on because of that Sony connection. But you got to keep in mind, just because they have a Sony connection does not mean that, you know, there's no use case for Jasmy in their Sony connection because it's different use cases. That's the bottom line. So while they may be the most popular in Japan, I'll never dismiss Jasmy because the way I look at it is, what is the more attractive um, risk to reward ratio, currently speaking, especially even though I'm in the profits with my Jasmy, it's still Jasmy. And don't get me wrong, this is not me, of course, bashing the A-Star community. If anything, I'll end up getting some A-Star. I believe in it. I think it's a solid particular token. But again, you do love the idea of getting credit where credit's due, and hence Jasmy. So again, let's get back on topic. Tokyo-based tech firm Jasmy, subsidiary of the Natural Capital Credit Consortium, Nccc, get used to seeing a lot more info about them, is of course preparing for the release of a digitally managed transaction system using blockchain tech. So for the newcomer that we heard earlier, I think it was James Francis, shout out to you. There you go. This is so much more than a meme token. Like you stated that you feel it's that way. It's just simply find out more information. And don't feel bad. There's so many people that also look at Jasmy in that same light. Now, a little bit more about this. Talks about how this has started recruiting participants for tests prior to the official launch, according to, of course, that company statement. The new marketplace, because let's face it, we are talking about how Jasmy is going to be game changer because it's going to create this whole decentralized data marketplace. Again, think of like the centralized data marketplaces, your Google, your Amazon, your Facebook, and your Apples. Who's the kryptonite for that? It would be Jasmy. So this new marketplace, featuring the use of blockchain tech to prevent fraudulent transactions, will support the listing of various carbon credit, such as Nccc units and domestic government issued J credits. That is game changer, right? Anything connected to the government, whether you're for it or not, is game changer. It basically is the fast track towards mass adoption. We know that, But Nccc units will come from a credit certification standard that the consortium plans to launch, of course, in 2025. Now, don't get it twisted. Don't have the attitude that, oh, great, so we're not going to see Jasmy to the moon until 2025. Well, that could still be a thing. But if you see them basically mention that you're going to have a new AI blockchain solution coming out here in 2024, you're also having Japan's version of a fourth quarter lockup, I guess no later than March, maybe possibly April if there's a delay. Bitcoin halving, right? All these things coming out, not to mention ETFs and so on. Well, you can draw the conclusion that this is just part of that utility, but it's not the only layer of utility that Jasmy provides, right? So we got to point that out. Getting more into this, data on credit acquisition and usage information will safely be stored using Jasmy's blockchain-based service, the statement said. And here's a quote before we kick it into the next part. In this quote, it says, in addition, tokenized carbon credits can be distributed and managed in various forms, as digital data, enabling the realization of unprecedented distribution methods and secondary and I can't read this part, distributions such as resale. Interesting. Now, regards to Jasmy, this is the last particular quote I'll pull up. And it does come from carbon-pulse.com. So for some of you guys that are watching on the recorded, you're like, yeah, you didn't hook me up with the link. Go look at it for yourself. Mentioned once again by name, Jasmy is also working with project developer Green Carbon, which plans to create J credits in collaboration with rice field farmers. How many times have you heard me joke around with the Rice Crop Consortium, right? Sounds like a joke, but it's a real thing. So I think it's big. With current participants, look at this, guys, enough to earn around 14,000 credits from some 7,000 hectares of rice paddy. I mean, I remember my mom, when she was alive, she was talking about the family farm down in Mindanao, southern Philippines and so on, and how many hectares they had. Here we have acres, they have hectares, a little bit different ratio. But I think that's a big deal, right? The path towards having some people, even from the agricultural side of things, using the utility of what? Green carbon credits, and having Jasmy as the utility based layer to create some of these things. I think that's obviously a big deal. Now let's jump back for a second. I want to show you guys just a little bit more. So getting into this and so on, Hara, believe it or not, also posted this, just in case some people are like, well, did Hara post about it? Yeah, he absolutely did post about this. And there it is. I mean, I think it's a big deal. That's why he's pointing it out as well. I'm glad to see other people from our community, basically get into this. But I'm going to share this last part, which I believe is on the very bottom. So let me just pull that up for a second. Yeah, here it is. So basically speaking, 11/29/2023, again, just yesterday, Nccc aims to bring companies, municipalities, academic researchers together to revitalize Japan's carbon credit market through the utilization of its forest and other resources, it said. Remember the whole thing with Dreamforce? If you've been following this, if you're a newcomer to Jasmy, it's okay. Go to the recorded section, not when we're on the live, but check it out for yourself. You have, for instance, Yoshida, who used to be part of the Jasmy team. But technically speaking, he is, right? And yeah, he's got this whole thing with Dreamforce going on. You have all these things that he's creating in regards to these sensors and so on, predicting like a person's baseball swing or somebody, throwing a baseball pitch. But this whole thing is a whole other big deal. So for one, this last part, the consortium has been endorsed by dozens of Japanese companies, including telecommunication major SoftBank Corp, who is very, very highly invested into Jasmy. As we know, we covered this a few times. They aim to support the creation of carbon credits by utilizing its agricultural, and look at this for a second, IoT as an Internet of Things solution, Kakashi. It has agreed, in regards to that reference, back to that site I gave you, to work with Singapore-based exchange ACX to facilitate Japan's voluntary carbon market. So we talk about mass adoption. We have one country getting together with another particular one to create just more of that, the utility in motion, and allow more citizens from other countries and Singapore to be able to use the utility. It's a beautiful thing. All right. So I want to get into the last part of this before we kick it into, of course, the next pause that we'll have in regards to IC Amphibians research. So in my notes, right, because I always tell you guys, relax and take notes, right? Always referencing Biggie Smalls. You have to keep in mind, like, the bottom line, like, why is this, so important? What's the significance? I mean, you might not understand the whole concept of, the Rice Crop Consortium and, carbon credits and so on. And you may not even like the idea. I mean, even I myself, my dream is in the future to have a few old school Impalas and some classic cars and so on. And I realize, probably by 2030, I'm going to have to pay carbon credits. By 2040, I think everybody will, right? But at the end of the day, you have to keep in mind, Japanese Natural Capital Consortium, like we mentioned, to launch this carbon exchange next spring. Well, why is that so significant to, for instance, to Jasmy or to you, me, and so on? Great question. Bottom line is this: the launch of a carbon exchange by the Nccc, of course, is significant for Jasmy for three major reasons. And let's get into those major reasons. Number one, increase in demand for Jasmy's, of course, blockchain tech. As the carbon credit market grows, and it will exponentially, there will be a need for a secure and efficient way to track and trade carbon credits. True. Jasmy's blockchain tech is well suited, of course, for this specific purpose. It is scalable. People saying Jasmy's not scalable. The heck it's not. Secure and transparent. And if anything, it'll be even that much more scalable when we get onto this layer 2. Hence why we're pointing that out. All the fudders that came after Jasmy saying, I don't like the idea of them going to this new thing. It's basically a V2. You don't like them, keeping or sticking to the promise of the white paper? Hey, I do. How about this? Will there be potential for new revenue streams? Yes, we know that. because we know that we want to be able to do more than we currently can do. So for one, Jasmy could generate revenue from the carbon exchange by providing its blockchain tech or by trading just that, carbon credits itself. How cool is that? All right, that third point I want to get into. Enhanced brand reputation. Now, you have seen examples in which Jasmy has branched out into other things and so on, trying to get a little bit more brand awareness. Hence why you have the whole thing with Avita. You understand the whole thing with Vio in the past and so on, especially with Sony. But being associated with the Nccc, of course, is big, but you got to keep in mind, being associated with them and, of course, a carbon exchange is going to help enhance Jasmy's brand recognition. And at a time that they need more of that brand recognition. You know, not enough marketing and so on. That's always been something that's been criticized. But we stated with Japan, you know, standout Japanese companies, even Sony back in the day, you know, it's a lot of that word of mouth. The product speaks for itself. But we do need to be able to have something, whether it's in the form of a carbon exchange, to enhance Jasmy's brand reputation and, of course, attract just that, new customers. It's a win, right? In the win column. Overall, the launch of the carbon exchange, of course, is a positive development for Jasmy. But you have to keep in mind, it's going to help accelerate just that, Jasmy's company's growth. And we all want that. Now, I know I gave you some examples. And if anything, this will be the last bit of examples before we get into the next part of what we have for you guys tonight. So, you know, basically, how do we get to the point where this whole thing of the carbon credit exchange could benefit just that, Jasmy? Because we understand that Jasmy is going to benefit these exchanges. And if anything, that's good for them. But we are talking about us and our beloved Jasmy. Well, for one, it's going to allow for increased liquidity for the Jasmy tokens. That sounds good. Jasmy tokens could be used, of course, to pay for the carbon credits, true, on the exchange. And that's also going to help in regards to, like we also mentioned, increase liquidity and make it more attractive to just that, other investors other than us as retail investors. Don't ever forget that. How about partnerships with just that, new customers? Great question. Jasmy could very well partner with new customers in the carbon credit market. Again, the big players that are part of these credit markets, especially in Japan, Singapore, and so on, once they get light that, hey, you know what? Who is this Jasmy? And if anything, they're connected to what? They're connected to this whole thing of blockchain. That sounds cool. Some people say, well, you know, Hedera's already doing this. True, they are. There's competition. But what about when it comes to specifically this area of the world, Southeast, you know, Asia, Japan, Singapore, and so on? Well, if you already have one that's regulatory compliant, then that in itself gives them the leg up. Now, this part. What about the development of new services, products, so on and so forth? I'd be asking that all day. Well, Jasmy could develop new products, services for the carbon credit market, such as carbon credit tracking and verification services. We know that it's not a could be, that's a will be. How so? With their connection of everything they got going on with IoT, especially with that WITS partnership, all these specific devices and so on, real devices being used to track just that data. Game changer. Now, in conclusion, in addition to the direct benefits of Jasmy, keep in mind the launch of the carbon exchange could also have a positive ripple effect for the Japanese economy. Again, back to the whole reference of Society 5.0. For example, the exchange could help attract investment to the Japanese from carbon credit buyers, sellers, and so on, but also, of course, around the world. The exchange could also help create new jobs in the carbon credit market. More jobs could also lead to more of that utility in motion, and more of that utility in motion means it incentivizes even the people that are doing the job. Overall, for you and me, the launch of the carbon exchange is a significant event, of course, for Jasmy and the Japanese economy as a whole. And that is a big win.